This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Xcast X-Files Podwatch, episode 85, covering Invocation and Redrum. I'm your host Carl Sweeney and I'm delighted to be joined by Baz Greenland. Hiya Baz.
Hi.
You did a rewatch for the Digital Fix, didn't you, recently?
Yeah, of most of the X-Files. So I covered about 15 episodes per season, all the kind of the big episodes, the mythology ones, and kind of fan favorites as well. I did go through season 8 late last year, and it's a brilliant series. I love Dogger. I think it's a real kind of breath of fresh air for the show. It's quite a good, strong narrative overall.
Did these two episodes make the cut? Did you cover these two at the time?
Redrum was brilliant. I did cover Redrum. I didn't cover Invocation. I'd seen it previously, but it's kind of the one that because there's so much mythology stuff going on in season 8. I did cut out a few of the Douglas and Scully ones. We just kind of I wanted to cover all of them, but I've been trying to stick religiously to about 15 episodes per season to get through the whole thing. So yeah, Invocation's one that I hadn't quite seen in quite a while actually. So this was kind of fresh for me.
Let's get into talking about Invocation then. So this aired in December 2000, as did Redrum actually. And Invocation is season 8, episode 5. It was written by David Amann and directed by Richard Compton. And this is the episode in which a young boy returns after being missing for about 10 years, but he appears not to have aged a day. Okay, Baz, so what are your thoughts on Invocation then?
It's a good episode. I mean, I think at this point there hasn't been a weak episode. I think the opening two parts are strong. Road Runners and the other episode, Patience. I like both of those. They get straight into Dogger and Sky and the X-Files. And this is another good follow-up, I think. It's kind of still them kind of finding their feet. It's one, like a lot of season 8 episodes, it feels like it's from the kind of season 2 era of the X-Files. There's a kind of feel to it where it's like darker, grittier. You can imagine this storyline easily being in season 2 or 3 of the X-Files, for example. It's not the strongest one. I think there are stronger. And Red One, we'll talk about in a minute, is definitely a stronger episode. But it's an interesting case for kind of Dogger to get his focus on, because I think that up till now it's basically he's almost like tagging along, trying to learn the X-Files with Sky. This is the first one he's kind of more invested in.
Yeah, I'd agree overall with what you said there. I don't think there's been a bad episode up to this point either in season 8. Roadrunners particularly is one of my favourites from this season. Yeah, I think the back to basics vibe carries things a long way, and that extends to this episode. Impatience and then Roadrunners and then this. Like you say, it sort of harkens back to the early years of the X-Files, the Vancouver era. This one, I don't think is quite as strong as those.
It's probably not as memorable. I think the Flying Bat and then the Wormy Road Runners, they're quite memorable and they're quite dark and nasty. This one doesn't really have that. I think the kids are a little bit creepy, to be honest. I think kids on X-Files quite often are creepy. They quite seem to be. But it's an interesting mystery. I guess what they don't do is they don't really make any attempt to solve it. It's kind of along like some of the later seasons when they kind of just go, oh, it's kind of spiritual and this happened, just to kind of bring closure. I mean, I'm not going to go into a closure over Samantha, that's a whole other thing, but it's a kind of, it doesn't really bother to explain why this ghostly presence comes back, apart from to offer closure, to assume to save his brother, and so his parents can get closure while they find his body. And that's kind of really, and that's probably why it's a bit weak. It's a good performance, good cast. Kim Griff, I think she's really good as a mother. She's quite beautiful, and there's some nice stuff for Dogger, particularly as it sets up Luke in a very subtle way.
You get the first indication here, don't you, of Doggett's history with his son. Like you say, it's not spelled out yet, but it's the first time it comes to the fore. Now, I seem to remember a lot of griping and complaining at the time when this aired from fans who felt that stuff with Doggett's son was a bit too similar to the Samantha Mulder storyline. But what I like that's different is that, Mulder would wear, his experience with, as relates to Samantha on his sleeve, wouldn't he? So he meets Scully and he tells her about it a couple of days later. Or he gets in a hostage situation with Wayne Barry and he tells him about it. Whereas with Doggett, it's almost internalised, isn't it? He's very, very reticent to talk about it. So the way the characters respond to the trauma is very different.
Yeah. I guess one negative I have really, it's a bit of Scully. I think the one thing I'm rewatching some season 8 episodes last year and for this as well is that by making her the believer of sorts, sometimes her assumptions seem a bit too on the nose. I don't really believe that she would make that assumption because she's trying too hard. And I guess maybe that's the kind of point. They were like Badler when they actually dress, she's trying to follow Mulder's course, and she is probably trying a bit too hard. But it just seems a little bit false that she doesn't really seem to care why the kid hasn't aged, and Doggett does. And actually, it's a very Sky's the scientist. She's a doctor. She's the one person who, if this was a season 2 episode, she'd be going, "No, Mulder, how do you explain the kid hasn't aged in 10 years?" Where she seems quite dismissive of that. And it's probably also a little bit of, Gillian Anderson's still brilliant. There's no denying that. But again, there's the tension with Dogger, particularly after she went out for her own and got herself killed last episode. She doesn't seem to have learned from that yet. I mean, that trust is earned, and they do become a good partnership over the rest of the series. But it is still a little bit unnecessary tension here, I think. I think you can get on and do it. I think. Get on and do the X-Files.
Yeah, it's interesting because the standalone episodes where they try and explore the Scully-Doggett partnership, in a deep way, stuff like Patience or Roadrunners, I think that works really well. Then you get episodes like Shore Kill or Salvage where it's not really like that. It's just a case, there's not really anything interesting for the characters to sink their teeth into. And I don't think those work particularly well. And this episode's somewhere in the middle, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the hook is really good, but I'd agree with what you said, that when it comes to explaining away what's going on, it's not great. I can't remember the character's name. The perpetrator, what was he called?
Ronald Purnell, is that character?
That's right, that's him.
One, yeah.
I mean, he was kind of pretty one-dimensional as a character, wasn't he?
Yeah,
So
completely one-dimensional hick, yeah. That's it. I assume he's the stepdad of the kid, Cal, who I kind of assume was forced to adopt the kid for his stepdad. But the mum as well, they're all kind of a bit stereotypical. You don't really get any depth to these characters at all. At the same time, in fact, the mum, she's quite engaging, so that kind of saves it a bit as well.
What about that stuff with the psychic? I mean, I felt at times that was a bit overplayed.
Yeah, and it probably doesn't help that I recently watched Closure as well. I've talked about that with Darren Mooney for Podwatch as well. There's a psychic in that as well, who's probably a better character. And Scully is immediately dismissive. Basically, what the crap are you talking about? None of it's believable. And that's what I meant about here. She almost seems too false. The psychic comes in and she's almost willing to listen, but it does seem a bit false. I don't know. But you also talk about the death scene as well. The psychic has that kind of vision as well.
Yeah, just that whole interlude, really. I felt the early stage of this episode were the best, I thought, and the longer it went on, the less I was into it. Yeah, I think when I was watching this for the first time in 2000 or 2001, when I saw it, I was just pleased still at this point that the X-Files had returned to doing these kind of creepy, low-key stories, and that sort of satisfied me enough at the time. If somebody was watching season 8 for the first time and just wanted to watch the best ones, I don't know if I'd necessarily advise watching this one, other than for the Doggett stuff.
No, I think you've got enough of that in the previous episodes, particularly Roadrunners and Patience as well, and the Redrums are not good episodes. So there's plenty of great stuff in season 8. It's a very strong series.
Okay, let's move on then to talk about Redrum. Redrum is episode 6 of season 8. It has a teleplay by Stephen Maeda, from a story by him and also by Daniel Arkin. And the episode was directed by Peter Markle. And this is the episode in which a man, having become the main suspect in the murder of his wife, starts to experience time in reverse. Alright, Baz, so I mean, you've already alluded to the fact you think this is a very strong episode.
Outside some of the big mythology stuff, I think it's one of the best episodes of the season. It's a nice, it's quite experimental. I mean, the X-Files experimented with kind of having, they're the episode from the point of view of the monster of the week in season 7, and again, this is one of the first times you kind of get this character. It's basically it's almost like equivalent of the Doctor Who, Doctor Light episodes. It's a Doug and Scully light episode because they almost fit into his story. It doesn't really focus on them at all. But Joe Morton is really good in this. He really does carry the episode, and it's a really interesting idea as well. Like you do get that momentum. You do feel for him as he's desperately trying to go back through time, realizing what's happening, and trying to find a way to save his wife.
Well, you can even go back earlier than something like Hungry, which is the one you were talking about, because this is kind of like a Twilight Zone style premise, really. So something like Monday, the living the same day over and over again, is sort of in this vein as well. I think a lot of people watching this for the first time would have been thinking about Christopher Nolan's film Memento as well. As the X-Files went on towards the end of season 8 and 9, you'd get other stuff like, Audrey Pauly, the one with the floating hospital.
Yeah. 4D as well, which does the kind of alternate reality. Yeah, they do start to... You do get a sense... I mean, start with season 7 particularly. Season 6 and 7, the X-Files does get, as most shows do, does get more experimental as it goes along, and this is kind of definitely one of those.
So like you say, there's a relative absence of Doggett and Scully here, and this episode was actually aired out of order, so this was the first standalone that was filmed after the first opening two-parter, but it was aired 6th, and the reason was that Gillian Anderson had negotiated a bit of a reduced workload for this season, so every 4 episodes or so, a script comes along where she's less involved, knowing that they had less of her, that they came up with this. I mean, like you say, it all hinges on whether the viewer buys into Joe Morton's character, gets invested in him or not.
I mean, he's an interesting actor because I don't know if you watch Scandal.
Yes.
He won Emmys for a character in that, but he's so over the top. I kind of find him quite ludicrous to watch. He's not at all. He's much more in keeping with his it's a bit of Terminator 2 Judgment Day reunion anyway, isn't it? With Robert Patrick, but he's much more that kind of subdued character like that. He's not hammy at all, and this could easily be. I always wonder if he played this role now in New X-Files, he'd be playing quite hammy, like he did in Scandal. He's very over the top and dramatic, and I think it's nice. It's really understated, which is probably kind of a theme through a lot of season 8. He does go back to basics. He doesn't go over the top and dramatic, apart from those big mythology episodes. So. I think he carries it really well.
Yeah, I do too. Well, in this episode, his lawyer is played by Bellamy Young, who's also in Scandal, isn't she?
Yeah, she's the first lady, isn't she? Yeah, so
yeah.
It was kind of a pre-Scandal team up there. So yeah, it's interesting.
I can't remember if they share many scenes together in Scandal. I assume they must have at some point. I just can't remember.
Yeah, not much actually. I think their paths quite different, but yeah, they do have a couple. But going back to what you said as well about where it was filmed in terms of where it was aired, I think it works perfectly here because I think I like the narrative structure that one episodes follow. You have the two-parter, then you have the first ludicrous case, which is flying bat monster. Then you have Scully try and go off on her own and hitting Doggett saving at the last minute. Then you have the more so the case of the week, and then you get some experimental. I think had you had this as episode 3, it would have been a very different dynamic.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever intended to be episode 3. I think it was just the like say Gillian Anderson's schedule mainly. It's interesting, the Twilight Zone premise, as we talked about. It means that you get kind of a nice, neat wrap up at the end where he's learnt his lesson, decides to take the punishment for his obstructing justice or whatever it was. So you get quite a nice...
That's a bittersweet ending, I think, because he does, and it gets more and more tense as he gets back towards trying to save his wife. And you do get that kind of sense that you get that closure, but you do get a sense, well, he does still suffer a bit, but not as much as he would have done had he gone for the original timeline.
So, I mean, it's a smartly constructed episode, isn't it? I mean, it's easy to just kind of overlook that, but it's very well put together, I think.
Definitely, yeah. And it shows us, we kind of think about by season 6 for the last season and a lot of really great episodes, but this season, certainly on this episode, certainly shows that the show had life in it. It could do something quite interesting. It wasn't completely out of ideas, which was good. I mean, that's why it's I think generally quite well received, which is why there was a season 9 in the first place. And I think it's episodes like this which showed that the X-Files still definitely has some life in it.
Yeah, well, that was my feeling too. But if you talk to some fans these days, there's still a lot of people who are just not reconciled to the idea of season 8.
Oh, I know. And to be honest, I didn't watch season 8 and 9 originally, but by that point, I think I'd gone to university and I stopped X-Files by that time anyway. Naturally, as you kind of move to university, you kind of stop watching a lot of your TV shows. So a lot of most of season 8 and 9, I didn't come back to until a few years later. People want to give up the Ghost of Mulder.
I think that's a large part of it, definitely. With this episode, I do think it's a good episode. I think, by the sounds of things, you like it a bit more than I do, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of my favourite season 8.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite put it up there, but it's a good episode. I can sort of see a case for skipping it if somebody was doing a partial rewatch and just wanted to focus on the more meaningful episodes for the characters. This wouldn't make the grade because by design they're peripheral to it, really. So yeah, it's how much people respond to the Joe Morton character and performance, I think. But it's a very clever episode. Have you got any final thoughts on this one, Baz, before we wrap up?
I think I've probably said everything. I think it's a really good episode. He said great narrative structure, great performances, and it's nice to something a bit different.
Yeah, I definitely would say if anyone has skipped season 8 or has only watched a few episodes, this is one you should check out. You need to see this one at least once, I think.
Absolutely.
Tomorrow on the Xcast X-Files Podwatch, the episodes we're talking about are Via Negativa and Shorekill. In the meantime, try and find us on Twitter if you can. We're at the X_cast. If you're on Facebook, you can find us there too. If you search for Xcast, you'll find X-Files Basement, the Xcast podcast fan group, and you'll also find our Xcast page. So please have a look for those if you can. But until next time, listeners, trust no one.